It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millzy from Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millzy Brews. Per our usual arrangement, I'm here to build a deck. This is episode 2 of my Warhammer 40K week. Earlier in the week, we saw my Tyranid deck. I'm really excited by that list. It was a ton of fun to make. Now we're going to go into the commander that had me the most excited on initial previews. This was the first commander that we ever saw from Warhammer 40K, Abaddon the Despoiler. But interestingly enough, I'm not as much of a big a fan of this deck as I was with the Tyranid deck. Tyranid deck. You can go back and see my opinions on that. Abaddon is kind of interesting because its deck kind of sits in this weird spot where half of it's really spell slingy. The other half uses this demon commander for it. Now I understand why Be'lakor's in this Be'lakor's in this deck. Abaddon cares about dealing damage to the opponents to get your spells cascade. All the demons care about dealing damage when they come in and that kind of thing, and they have a bunch of different effects. So I understand, and also the demons, my understanding, fit the lore of the Chaos tribes. So I understand it. I understand the reasoning, but I really think that Abaddon works best as a spell slinging commander, especially in kind of that traditional Izzet fashion where we cast spells to deal damage to our opponent, to make tokens, to do that kind of thing. Also, we get to cascade. Cascade meaning whenever you would cast a spell, you exile spells from the cards from the top of your library until you reveal a spell that has less CMC than the spell that you chose, and you get to cast it for free. So Abaddon's kind of interesting, and I spent a little bit of time before doing this video wanting to see where I wanted to take the deck. I think on first look, I thought this said combat damage. Whenever you dealt combat damage to your opponent. Interestingly, it's also worded total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn. So it's not just damage that you're dealing to one opponent. You know, for example, I'm going to come over here really quick because I kind of want to show where my thought process is on this. Let's take a card like Gutter Snipe, for example. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. Well, that would be, if we're playing a standard commander game, that would be 6 damage that Abaddon would see. And that means that for the rest of our turn, any spells we cast from our hand with CMC 6 or less would have Cascade, which is a lot of spells and a lot of really good spells at that. The only downside to Abaddon, if you believe that there is a downside to that ability, which I don't think there is that it's only from our hand. So if we go on a Cascade train, we don't get the value back, right? We don't get the magic back off the top of our library, pun intended. Only the spells from our hand have Cascade. So I think there's a lot of ways we can take this, but the first thing I want to do, just like I did with the Tyranid Swarm, is look at the deck list and see what cards we want to use from the deck list. Now, as opposed to the Tyranid deck, which is a very tribal build, this one is not. I'm actually going to be taking more of the spell slinging route, so I'm going to be using a lot less of this deck's resources. So we get to be a little bit pickier about what we're going to use. So, as much as I appreciate the demon sub-theme, I don't think I'm going to use it. I think we really want to focus on utilizing our spell cards. Now, the other thing I just realized, because I'm smart and I read the card beforehand, is that Abaddon says spells from your hand. That includes creatures. That's not non-creature spells. So that's good to know as well. So I'm going to be looking at mainly the Izzet spells out of the deck, and of course some of the big spells, but we're going through the creatures. The first one that seems interesting here is Exalted Flamer of Tiznetch. At the beginning of your upkeep, return an instant or sorcery at random from your graveyard to your hand. This is great because it's going to allow us to bring our spells back to our hand after we cast them. Whenever you cast a spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is perfect. That's exactly what we want. It's going to start the gravy train of returning things back to our hand. I like the idea of Plague Drone. It says if an opponent would gain life, that player loses that much life instead. That seems kind of interesting, but I'm not sure that that's what I want to do just yet. Let's look at Tizanger Shaman. Flying, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, copy the next instant or sorcery spell you cast. When you cast it, you may choose new cards with copy. This is good because I can see Abaddon's top end being some sort of turns deck where we get up top on where we build our value engine up as we cast spells, and then we take a few extra turns to continue to deal damage to our opponents. Let's see, Heralds up to the Netch, just flying and cascade, which I think could be interesting. So you can see a lot of this demon sub-theme is dealing damage when we sacrifice creatures and things like that. But here you go. This card is probably one of the best cards for our strategy, and I'm really excited about this one. Magnus the Red. Instant sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast for each creature token you control. So we're going to build into the spell slinging creature tokens. So we're going to be able to get this down for 5. And then hopefully when we start casting spells, we're casting them just for mana. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we get a token. So Magnus the Red is exactly what we want, and it's going to really help us out. This has Cascade. When it enters the battlefield, does damage equal to the number of spells you've cast this turn to any target. I don't mind that, but it seems a little expensive. We have Pink Horror. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to any target. Okay. Whenever it dies, create 2/2/2 black demon horror creature tokens named Blue Horror with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, deal 1 damage to any target. So that's kind of interesting. I think it fits towards our strategy. So we have Bloodthirster, which is a demon that kind of acts like Port Razor. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you untap it, and then after this combat, there's an additional combat, and it can attack a player attack this turn. This is one of the demons that I'm half interested in keeping in the deck. It says whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, it deals damage equal to the spell's mana value to any target opponent. This is the one demon I'm interested in trying because it's kind of a Warstorm Surge effect, but for our spells, so I kind of like that. Beginning your end step, you may pay X. If you do, create X tokens with Menace. X can't be greater than the amount of life you lost this turn. All right, Mutualist Vortex Beast. It enters the battlefield, flip a coin for each opponent you have. For each opponent flip you win, draw a card. For each flip you lose, it deals 3 damage to that player. Interesting, it just feels really expensive. In order to change, just draws cards. Okay, so let's go through and add our creatures here. I really like Magnus the Red. I see Magnus the Red getting played in a lot of spell slinging decks, especially for that value that it adds. So what we're going to do here is just add all our cards in here. Heralds of Tenef, I think we're going to skip it for now. And we'll put Cavery Secrets in there. Okay. So as far as the creatures go, that's kind of what I like. I think we'll end up probably looking for a little bit more, but I see this being a very red-blue heavy deck, and we're going to use the black to support us. So let's go through the spells. We see Brainstorm for sure, Dark Ritual for sure. Reverberate, I really like. We can look into some more copy spells as well, but I like Reverberate. Chaos Warp seems like a great idea. Ruinous Blast. So they're playing a lot of cards that are in just high mana, so they can cascade. Exile any number of target creatures controlled by different players. For each creature exiled this way, its controller reveals from the top of the library until they reveal a creature card. Put that card onto the battlefield, then puts the rest in the bottom of the library in the order. So this is kind of interesting. It's kind of Chaos Warp, but a little bit more higher scale. And I don't know that I love it. I think it scares me because there's too many great decks that just have creatures they want to get. The Galaxy Burn deals X+2 damage to each creature that didn't enter the battlefield this turn. Great pain. And I really like Blood for the Blood God. This is a very big spell. But let's go ahead and add these. Again, I expect a lot of this deck to be classic spell slingy stuff. But what I want to do is I want to start with what I want to keep from the deck. And then we will move into... I've pulled up a few EDH rec pages. I advise you guys when you're building decks, if you're newer to this whole thing, when you're building your deck and you're not entirely sure where to start, EDH rec can be a great resource for that. But sometimes I like to pull up commanders that maybe are different to my choice, but might work on the same strategy. So I'll explain that in a second when I get to EDH rec. But just keep that in the back of your mind. Just because it's not the same commander doesn't mean that it doesn't necessarily run the same strategy and that you can't find some things that way. Here we're going to see Soul Ring. We're going to see the 3 Talismans, which are great. I like the Lantern. Whenever it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target creature, and current creature gets menace and plus X+0, where X is the equipped creatures. It seems pretty expensive. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control from anywhere other than your hand, or cast a spell anywhere from other than your hand, create a treasure token. So this is going to pay off that Cascade. Ruinous Power. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose an opponent at random, exile the top card of that player's library until end of turn. You may play that card, and you may spend manas over mana of any color. When you cast a spell this way, its owner loses life. That's pretty cool. Is this a reprint? I don't think so. I think that's new. That's kind of cool. It fits exactly what our strategy wants to do. All right, the Horus's Heresy. Let's see. For each opponent, gain control up to 1 target non-legendary creature that opponent controls. For as long as we have this, draw a card for each creature you control but don't own. Starting with you, each player chooses a creature. Destroy each creature chosen this way. I like it. I'm just worried that it is going to end up badly for us. So half interested. And Warstorm Surge seems kind of cool because when we're making those tokens off casting the spells, we can use it. Interestingly enough, this deck does not get an Arcane Signet, which is kind of interesting to me because you would think that you would want it, especially in a 3-color deck, you would want an Arcane Signet. I'm just kind of interested as to why that's the case. But anyway, we'll add our 3 Talismans there. We get Chromatic Lantern. I really like Chromatic Lantern, especially in non-green 3-color decks, because you don't have access to all of that ramp that you would traditionally use. And the Chromatic Lantern is going to allow all your lands to tap for any color, which is just going to help you push your strategy forward. So it's a good thing to consider there. Warstorm Surge might actually end up being too expensive, and so we may end up cutting it later. But all right, let's see if there's any lands that we really care about. Command Tower, of course. Exotic Orchard seems really fair, especially because most players are going to be playing any sort of combination of our colors. We don't need the Path of Ancestry because we're not playing the Demon Tribal. And I don't really like anything else, of course, besides basic lands. But we can tackle the basic lands later. Okay. So I want to start with our spell slinging support cards. Like I said, we'll go ahead and go into EDH rec here in a second. But so the first things that come to mind, you have Gutter Snipe, right? It deals 2 damage to each opponent when we cast a spell. So my thought process here is we start off our turn with a really small spell. Ponder, Preordain, Brainstorm, these cheap blue draw spells. We have a couple of these guys that ping our opponents for damage. Then we get to cast our bigger spell and have it cascade. So that's kind of my thought process. Here we have my brain just completely stopped. A card I really think that I really like for spell slinging decks, especially because it just nets you mana, is Stormkiln Artist. It's going to give us a treasure every time we cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, which we really want to do. That's what it is. Electrostatic Field. Electrostatic Field is going to deal 1 damage to each opponent. The other things I can think of off the top of my head, Ponder, Preordain, Faithless Looting. These really cheap spells that are going to get us some cards into our hand. And then I think I'll probably go a little bit more into extra turns later. But what I kind of want to do here is talk about an ability like Magecraft. This was an idea I had right as soon as I looked at Abaddon. You know, we got all these Magecraft cards in Strixhaven, and I think a lot of these fit our strategy. Archmage Emeritus is kind of the big key card that a lot of people choose when it comes to spell slinging decks, but I actually really don't want it. I'm really more interested in things like Professor Onyx and Sedgemoor Witch, because I think we can use these two for more effects, especially Professor Onyx. And the reason is because when we cast a spell, we're dealing 2 damage to each opponent, losing 2 damage. Each opponent loses 2 life, and we gain 2 life. So we're doing 6 life to our opponents, and then we're gaining 2, and that's going to already turn on. That's already going to turn on Abaddon to make most of the spells in our deck probably cascade. Now, Sedgemoor Witch creates tokens, and the reason that I like Sedgemoor Witch, especially in a spell slinging deck like this, is we want to play things like Sedgemoor Witch and Poppet Stitcher and a few other things that make tokens when we cast spells, so that we can use things like Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar to sacrifice our creatures for mana to keep our spell slinging going. So I like Poppet Stitcher. I like Sedgemoor Witch. There's a couple more. We'll see them as we go into the EDH Rec pages, but that's the kind of thing that I really like. Argument could be made for Veyran or Zephi, but I don't really think they're doing exactly what we want them to do. So let's go into EDH Rec. So I've pulled up 3 EDH Rec decks that I think are going to be pretty close to what we're trying to do. Abaddon actually already has a page. It looks like we have about 200 decks that have been made already. So we'll get to see if our ideas have been about correct. We have Kess, a deck that I already have built as far as spell slinging goes. But it's another Grixis spell slinging commander, so I think it'll give us some ideas for cards and things like that. So this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say pull up commanders in similar color combinations that do similar things. And then the last is Anhelo the Painter from Capenna. Now, the warning on Anhelo will be that Anhelo is trying to use those tokens to double cast spells, which I think can be really useful. So Anhelo might even find a spot in Abaddon's deck. Same thing with Kess. The only bad part is Abaddon does not cascade from the spells we cast from the graveyard with Kess. I still think Kess deserves a spot because we could recast our cheap spells from our graveyard, get these triggers to go off, and then cast our big spells from our hand. So I'm presenting my ideas here for what my goal is. And now what we're going to do is start finding creatures and spells to slot into these kind of things. So let's go to Abaddon's EDH Rec page. Again, I recommend anytime you go to an EDH Rec page, what you want to do is take a look at the cards that are on the page and compare them to what you're trying to do with your strategy. Just because a card is on this page doesn't mean that it's for your deck. It's the best card for your deck. It just means that players are playing it in this deck. And what I recommend you do is read the card and try to understand why it would fit into your deck. And if you're not sure, then that's fine. But don't just put in a card blindly because you don't understand why. So let me pick a perfect example. So we have Delayed Blast Fireball right here from Commander Legends 2. This is a card that on the surface you go deals 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. If it was cast from exile, it deals 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control instead. And you'd say, well, I don't want to pay the 6 mana to foretell it. It seems like a lot of red mana. Well, you have to remember when you cascade, you're casting the spell from exile. So the cool part about Delayed Blast Fireball here is you're not just going to deal 2, you're going to deal a 5 if you cascade into it. And if you don't cascade into it, you just foretell it and you cast it later. The bad part about a spell like this is if you play if you play this for its foretell cost, for the purposes of Cascade, it doesn't become 6 for Cascade, it's only 3. So, for example, Delayed Blast Fireball, if we choose to play it, is a card we want to hit on Cascade, not a card that we want to cast from our hand. And so we just need to be a little bit careful with the spells we choose to make sure that we're doing that. That being said, I think Delayed Blast Fireball fits exactly what I want to do. It deals damage. It can get creatures out of the way. That's a good card. I really like Passionate Archaeologist. This is a background from Commander Legends. And it says, commander creatures you own have. So as long as Abaddon is out and this card is out, we will get this ability. If Abaddon leaves the battlefield, we will no longer have this ability until it comes back in. But it says whenever you cast a spell from exile, this creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So Abaddon, hopefully, once we start cascading into spells, will be dealing damage. Now, one of the cool sub-themes that I started using in Kess that I really enjoy with Kess that I really enjoy that I think is going to work well with Abaddon is a card called Arcane Bombardment from Capenna. It says whenever you cast your first instant or sorcery spell each turn, exile an instant or sorcery at random from your graveyard. Then copy each card exiled with Arcane Bombardment. You may cast any number of them without paying their mana costs. What I like about Arcane Bombardment is once we get up to the mana for it, and we fill our graveyard up with Dark Rituals and Jeska's Wills, and these cards that either net us mana or net us value, or there are 1 or 2 extra turn spells that do not exile themselves when you play them, like Time Warp and Temporal Manipulation. These are extra turn spells that that was not it. That do not exile themselves after they're played. So what I like about these two is that we can dump them into our graveyard, and then we can either use the Kess plan, if that's the route we want to go, to reuse them again, or we can use Arcane Bombardment to take them and put them underneath it, and then every turn we can play them, if as long as we hit the RNG of them out of our graveyard, we can play them every turn. So what I like about these Grixis Spell Slingy decks are we kind of can set up a game plan, where we're always getting value. We're always accumulating value, and we're not, hopefully we can just continue to push out value and kind of slowly take control over the game. Another great spell slinging enchantment that I think we get to use here is Thousand Year Storm. It says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, copy it for each other instant sorcery you've cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is basically a Storm enabler. Storm is what that ability is. But Storm also cares about non-creature spells. But basically, this is going to take all of our cheaper spells and turn them into +1s for whatever we cast later. And this is going to kind of start pushing us up the now. The one thing that I expect to see out of Abaddon, because we're in the perfect color for it, is treasure sub-themes. And I think this is the route I'd like to go with my Abaddon deck, because treasure is such an interesting resource, and we have so many great things that can make it. So we just got an enchantment in the Capenna Commander decks called Rain of Riches. So when it enters the battlefield, we get 2 treasures. Our goal is to have more than other treasure production sources. We don't want Rain of Riches to be our only production source. But our goal is to have, at minimum, we get 2 treasures when we have Rain of Riches. And it says the first spell you cast each turn that has mana from a treasure spent to cast it has Cascade. So now we have another way to cascade spells if we want to. The thing I like about this here is that let's say we can't deal damage right away with Abaddon or with any of our creatures, but we want to cast a big spell from our hand. If we have treasures, we get to cascade with that spell off of Rain of Riches. I think the thing that intrigues me the most about this deck is that I get to play Prosper in it. Prosper is a commander in its own right. In fact, it's a very popular commander in its own right. But I like it as a secondary commander for this deck. Prosper says at the beginning of your end step, you exile the top card of your library, and you can play that card until the end of your next turn. So whether Prosper leaves the battlefield or not, you can play that spell or card, because if you exile a land, you can play it. And then it says whenever you play a card from exile, you create a treasure token. Well, this works with Cascade, because if we Cascade and cast a spell out of that, we get to get a treasure token. So I think Prosper works really well. I also think Kess fits our strategy really well. Being able to replay those cheap cards out of our graveyard when we play them. We're going to be looking to dump these brainstorms and these small spells into our graveyard, and Kess will actually allow us to play them a second time, which I think is really helpful. All right, so let's keep going on Abaddon. We have Torwalkie from Dominaria United. If another source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 to that permanent or player instead. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to any target. So Torwalkie's kind of a bigger gutter snipe, but the difference is it's actually going to benefit all of our gutter snipes and our electric static fields, because it actually increases the damage. So I think Torwalkie seems like it would be really good for the deck, because it's going to increase, let's see. It's going to increase Pinkor. It's going to increase all of these guys like Keeper of Secrets or Gutter Snipe or Exalted Flamer or Electrostatic Field. All these creatures that we're purposely putting in because they're going to deal damage to players on cast. Torwalkie is actually not only going to do damage itself, but it's going to plus the damage from other ones. Now, my hope here is that when we go to cast something like a 1,000-Year Storm with a Cascade, or a big thing like Arcane Bombardment with Cascade, hopefully we can Cascade into some of these cheaper creatures and kind of set them up. I don't expect to see these all right away, but I do expect that we should be able to kind of cascade down the line. So to take this a step back, on our channel a few weeks ago, I released my deck tech for a Modi, Celebrate a Bounty. That's my Simic Cascade deck. And the lesson I learned from that deck was that you're purposely trying to cast your big spells when you can with Cascade, because they're going to cascade into literally everything else in your deck. So, for example, Blood for the Blood God, if we can cast it for as cheap, even if we can cast it for 3 mana, it's 11 CMC or mana value on the stack, which is probably going to allow us to cascade into literally everything else in our library. And that's going to become really beneficial for us. What I'd like to see is we cast a bigger creature or we cast a bigger enchantment and cascade down into a cheaper spell, and then we get to trigger these all off and have a good time. So we just kind of need to make sure that we're selecting our spell and creature lineup so that we're making sure that we're taking the most advantage of that. Okay. So we have we see a couple of these suspend cards, which I completely understand why people are playing them, because with a Prosper or anything like that, they are going to become really good. I'm just not sure which of them that I want to play. I think Ancestral Vision and Wheel of Fate seem kind of cool. Inevitable Betrayal seems pretty cool, and Profane Tutor seem pretty cool. I just don't know how high up on them I am, because I get it. I get why you play them. They're cheap, and I believe... can you play them off of Cascade? That's a good question. I actually don't think I've ever... I actually don't know. I'll have to take a look at this when I have more time, and seeing whether or not you can cast these off of Cascade. I don't know that off the top of my head, and so what I'm gonna say right here is I don't want to take the time on camera to look this up. So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flag these 4 cards and keep them aside. And what I'm gonna do is later I'm gonna take a look at these. And if you can cast these off of Cascade for free, because you're not actually paying anything to cast them, or you don't need to pay anything to cast them, then I think they're odd. At least these two for sure are includes. I think this one's pretty great too. And Wheel of Fate is what it is if you care about the wheel effects. These three for sure seem like auto includes. If that's the case, and you can cast them off of Cascade for free without paying the suspend, then I think they're auto includes. But I don't know that for sure, and I don't want to waste the time here to look that up. I'm sure that if that's the case, I can find a couple extra slots to fit them in, and we'll go from there. So, like I said, I don't want to take the time now. But again, if they are, I think they're worth it. If not, we're gonna keep going. So, we saw Chaos Warp there, which I don't particularly mind. I like the idea of Windfall though, because it can kind of refill our hand, especially if we don't have a hand. But here's a perfect thing that I forgot. Something like Rhystic Study, which is going to draw us cards when our opponents play spells. All right, we'll get down into creatures. So here's where I expect to see a lot of our payoffs. So we see Gutter Snipe. We see Dockside Extortionist, which makes a ton of sense. I have to figure out if Dockside's truly worth it in this deck or not. Now, I love something like Twilight Prophet, because right away on our turn, this is going to deal damage to our opponents. So I kind of like that. At the start of our upkeep, if we have the City's Blessing, so if we have 10 or more permanents, reveal the top card of a library, each opponent loses X life, and we gain X life, where X is that card's mana value. I really like that because Abaddon cares about our opponents losing life, not necessarily taking damage. And then we have Firebrand Archer. Firebrand Archer says whenever we cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So that seems like about right up the alley of what we're trying to do. We could play Goblin Electromancer if we're looking on cheapening our spells. I don't think we are. I think we're okay with that. Here I'm just trying to look through the cards here, see if we can find any more really, really cool payoffs. I love Jin Gitaxis, especially on the top end, because it can start doubling the first spells, the first of a certain type of spell that we cast each turn. I also like this as our top end. We can give it Cascade and really get good work out of it, but it's also going to start just getting us major value. I like Sakashima and I like Goldspan. Sakashima is great because if we copy Abaddon, we get double Cascade. So I guess an argument could also be made for Spark Double, because they both are going to do the same thing. They both will copy our commander, or they'll copy any other creature we have down, and give us twice the things. So we see Goldspan here, and this is where I have to decide if I want to play Treasures or not. I think having Prosper in the deck means that I'm kind of leaning towards Treasures. And if that's the case, then I think I want to try to push this towards Treasures. We'll just have to figure out how exactly to do that. So I think if we come back up here, looks like 11 people have built treasure theme decks. So let's see what we can do to push this just a little bit towards Treasures. So we see Prosper there. My guess is that we're going to be using things like Big Score, Unexpected Windfall. So yeah, we see that there. We see Big Score, probably Unexpected Windfall. These are draw spells that both do the same thing. Pitch a card, and we draw 2 and create 2 treasures. I like the idea of Galazeth. Galazeth is kind of cool because what it does is it allows our treasures to tap for mana instead of sacrificing them for mana, but only for instants or sorceries. So I think that could work. That could be a definite way. Zorn doubles the amount of treasures we get, so that makes a ton of sense. Where was it? Where was Professional Facebreaker? So we'll add Zorn. Now, I think there's a lot of ways to take this deck at this point. I'm going to make the conscious effort to start spinning slightly towards treasures as a sub-theme. You don't have to do that. You could fill the rest of this deck out with greats, instant, and sorceries and push this that way. But I think I like the treasure sub-theme, and so that's the way that I'm going to kind of spin Abaddon. So Professional Facebreaker says whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get a treasure. So if we dealt damage to all 3 players, with a creature combat damage, we would get 3 treasure tokens. And then the other thing I added was Zorn, which is doubling the treasures. Cool. Well, we put in Jeska's Will, right? Jeska's Will, one of our better choices as far as red enchantments go, can get us a red for each card in an opponent's hand, and we can exile the top 3 cards of our library and play them this turn. Okay. So since we've chosen the treasure route, we want to start building into Prosper and Galazeth as our kind of sub-commanders. They both do a very similar thing. They both care about really similar things. And so I think we should try to build in them as much as we can. We see Deadly Dispute, which isn't a bad idea. It allows us to sacrifice a creature, which we're already trying to make so many of them anyway, to draw us a couple cards and make a treasure. So I like that. We see Cyclonic Rift, which I feel like is a great card. The only downside of Cyclonic Rift in this deck is that if we cascade into it, we have to cast it for the 2 mana. We cannot overload it off of Cascade. So it's the only downside, but I think every other time it's just going to end up helping us out a ton. We see Light Up the Stage. I think Light Up the Stage works really well with Prosper, and allowing us to grab cards off the top and trying to cast them from exile. Here we get into our sorceries. Grape Shot is a really big finisher because of the Storm. Copy it for each spell cast before it. I think this is something, Grape Shot's something to consider for sure. We see Mana Geyser. Mana Geyser is really good because it gives you mana for each tapped land your opponents control, which can potentially be a lot. But I want to go into the tutors and see what of our tutors we want to play. Most of the time, I find the tutors go and get you those pieces that really help you. So here, I think we do D-Tutor, we do Vampiric Tutor, and we do the Mystical Tutor. Like I said, I want to double check on Profane Tutor, and if it does what I think it does, then it's getting played for sure. But these tutors are probably going for these enchantments. These really big enchantments that are going to push treasure forward, or if we don't have a thing that makes tokens, they're going for those. All right, we're at 63. So we need to probably start adding more spells than anything else. Rain of Riches. Okay. So I want to go back to this, to everything. And let's go down to the spells. Pardon me. And see if we find anything else we like. I love Deadly Rollick. It's one of our best removal spells because we can do it for free if we control Abaddon. I also really like Reality Shift. For 2 mana, we can exile a creature. So I really like that. Dig Through Time. So we see Pongify and like Rapid Hybridization. Isn't a bad idea. See Demonic Consultation. I'd rather avoid that as a win con. I've just never been a giant fan of that card, but I understand why people like it. It's just not my thing. Gataxian Probe could be interesting. You got Feed the Swarm to get rid of enchantments, which tend to be the hardest thing for black to get rid of. I like the idea of Gamble. And I like the idea of Gamble in these decks because I like the idea of Gamble because even if we have to pitch the card, hopefully we have ways to get things back. I'm going to add the Imperial Seal because I own one. If you don't own an Imperial Seal, don't worry about that. You can take it out. I'm got to remember that at the end of the day, I'm building from what I have access to and how I would build this deck. And I understand if that means that other people wouldn't want to do that. As far as finishers go, I really like the idea of Mizzix's Mastery and Mind's Desire. Mind's Desire is a card I play in a Modi. It has Storm. And then Mizzix's Mastery will let you either exile a card from your graveyard and play it, or you can overload it and play every card in your graveyard. And then Mind's Desire, what it does is it copies for each time you've cast a spell this turn, but you basically look at the top card until in a turn you can play it, without paying its mana cost. So I love the idea of that, just to give us a little bit more oomph in the later end of the game. So we saw the Time Warp there. We see Past in Flames. Exile sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback for the turn. Its flashback cost is equal to its mana cost, which isn't bad. Divining Top and Scroll Rack seem kind of interesting. They seem like this seems like it would be the kind of deck that want them. But honestly, I found in Omodi that you never really have that many issues with getting good spells off the top. So I'm not as worried about that. Protection Racket seems interesting. Exquisite Blood seems interesting because it would gain us all the life from these little pings that we're doing with our spell slingers, but I don't think we really need it. Theater of Horrors seems interesting. Exiling those cards for us and getting it back. But I'm not really seeing anything I love here. Let's go into the Planeswalkers. I mean, the only other one that I can really think of that I really would want if we're going to go this spell slinging route is Saheeli, the one that gives us Servos when we cast non-creature spells, just because that way they can tap with Galazeth because they're artifacts, and we can sacrifice them to Phyrexian Altar. I like that. Argument can be made for Narset. Argument can be made for Chandra. Chandra, you just you tick her up, and then once you get to her emblem, you deal a bunch of damage. So I think that I've just sold myself for Chandra Torch of Defiance just a little bit for that ending ability. Okay. We'll get into lands in a little bit. Let's keep going. We added the Arcane Signet, which for some reason didn't come in this deck. Felwar Stone doesn't seem like a bad idea. I feel like more often than not, our opponents are going to be playing, at least one of our opponents is guaranteed to be playing one of our colors. So Felwar Storm will always give us that. Now, the one thing I've found with Grixis decks, in my experience, is that we need fast mana. And unfortunately, we're going to need to rely on it to push ourselves forward. So I'm looking at like Mox Opal and Mana Crypt. These are two artifacts that... Mox Opal taps for a mana as long as we have 3 artifacts, and then Mana Crypt, of course, one of your more infamous artifacts, tapping for 2 mana, and we have the chance to lose a life each turn. Since we're going to play so many artifacts that cost 0, I want to go ahead and toss Urza's Saga in there to allow us to go get Soul Ring, Mox Opal, Mana Crypt, and maybe we can find another option. You do have the option of... where is it? Sorry. We do have the option of Chromox, which when it comes in, we pitch a card from our hand and it taps for any cards of that colors. I don't mind that one. It's just not my preference as far as that goes. So I think the same thing that we talked about with these suspend cards are going to need to be talked about here with Mox Tantalite, Lotus Bloom, and Soul Talisman. If we can cascade into them and get them for free, I think Max Tantalite and Soul Talisman, or Max Tantalite specifically, but probably Lotus Bloom as well, might be worth it. But again, I need to look up that ruling. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put down in the comments of this video, but down in the description of this video, I'll let you know what I find, whether it works or not. And if it does, then I think you should add them in. So what we'll do for now is throw them in our sideboard. We'll throw them in our sideboard on here, and then later we can determine whether that's the case or not. Now, Some of them, to be honest, I think are worth it alone, because if we can get Prosper out, which we can, and we're playing enough tutors to go get Prosper, we'll still get the treasure off the Suspend. But it's definitely something to keep in the back of our minds as far as that goes. So let's go into our land. Let's go into our landy lands. I'm looking for Bloodstained Mire. Sorry, Bloodstained Mire. Okay, so we're going into our fetch lands, Bloodstained Mire, Scalding Tarn. And then we have blue-black, which is Polluted Delta. Not Polluted Dead. Polluted Delta. Okay. We need our shock lands. We have Blood Crypt, we have Steam Vents, and we have Watery Grave. Okay. I'm going to see here what else we have access to. We have Xander's Lounge, which is our tri-land. So that's a great thing we have access to. And then, yeah, that was going to be my next idea, was our commander lands. So we have Luxury Suite. We have Morphic Pool. Blue, and then we need blue-red, which is Training Center. Okay, and then I like the Innistrad lands that come in if you have two others. So that's Haunted Ridge, Storm Carved, Coast, and then what's the blue-black one? Shipwreck Marsh. Cool. All right, so we're starting to build a pretty good mana base here. Again, we're not playing any. Ramp spells, of course, because we don't have access to any. So we do want more lands that will tap for more things. I like the idea of the check lands. The only problem is we need to make sure we're playing enough lands that actually have access to them. Mana Confluence and City of Brass seem like really good ideas. Just because we really want access to all of our colors, and we're going to need them quickly. This combination is a combination of colors where you need to make sure that you have your colors quickly and have access to them. I like the pathways for sure. I don't know the name of the pathways off the top of my head, so let's just search here for them. We want Blight Step, we want Clearwater, and we want River Glide. Those are our three pathways that we can use, up to 21 lands. I like the idea of the Pain lands. I feel like they could end up being pretty useful. So that is Sulphur Springs. We just saw them up here, Shivan Reef. And then I like the idea of the filter lands. We have Cascade Bluffs. Cascade Bluffs, you have, what is it, Sunken Ruins? Was I correct on that? I was. The red-black one, I can never remember. There it is, Graven Cairns. I don't play red-black is one of those color combinations I do not play very much of, so I don't know all those dual lands off the top of my head. We'll keep going down. Okay, I love Reflecting Pool. That's a great option. I think Plaza of Heroes for sure. Now, there's a couple lands I play in Kess. I'm trying to think. You have like Spire of Industry and things like that tap if you have access to the Colors of Mana, which is something we can do. I don't actually hate the idea of playing the 3 artifact lands. If we have anything that cares about the amount of artifacts we have, I'm not sure. So maybe that. I'm trying to think, what other lands am I missing here? Okay, well, let's move on to Kess. Let's see if Kess gives us any sort of ideas as far as spells go. Again, what I want to do here for Kess is let's look at her treasure build, since we're going up the same theme. Storm King's Thunder can be a really cool finisher. This is a card that copies the next spell you cast X times, which can be really, really good. That can get us into a fun amount of situations. All right, we see Brass's Bounty. Prismaric Command seems like a good idea. It acts as a faithless looting. It makes us a treasure. It can destroy artifacts if an opponent, we're worried about an opponent. We see Revel in Riches, which is kind of our treasure win con. So we got to add that bad boy in there. And then we have we have Seize the Spoils, which is our 3 mana treasure draw card. So that seems like a really great idea. We'll move down. Again, I love the idea of Dockside. I just wonder how often it's going to really do what we want it to do. So I'm going to keep it off for now. We see Prosper. We see Academy Manufacturer. That was the one I forgot. So anytime we would make a clue, food, or treasure, instead we make all of them. That gives us more stuff to tap with Galazeth. We're at 105, but that's okay. We can always cut down later. Pitiless Plunderer is a great combo enabler, especially with words, especially with Phyrexian Altar. Us having Phyrexian Altar, because we can sack a token to Phyrexian Altar or sack a creature to Phyrexian Altar to make a mana, and then get a treasure out of it. So that's pretty good. We end up going up some good mana. I like the idea of Cormella. I'm just not sure on that one. Marionette Master is a pretty fun finisher as far as treasure goes. Whenever an artifact is put in the graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power, which most times is going to be 4. The only card I haven't seen yet is the red creature that deals a damage whenever a artifact comes in. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Love Young Pyromancer, though. We need 1 or 2 more of those cards that make tokens when we cast spells, just so we can always make sure that we're getting those abilities down. Like the idea of Leer, because it allows us to cast spells from our graveyard and things can't get countered. Like the idea of Mayhem Devil. There it is, Reckless Fireweaker. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. That's what we want, since we're going to be using those treasures. And we definitely have a lot more creatures than we'll end up playing, and we'll end up having a lot more instances of sorceries, but that's okay. We want to get as many cards in as we can to consider. I like Smoldering Egg. It's a card that kind of takes its time to get up, and then when it gets to the back side, it deals 2 damage to any target whenever we cast a spell. It looks like it's taking its time, but that's okay. We can keep going. All right, I like the idea of Spell Swindle. So it's not the internet. It looks like it's just... Oh. Yeah, there we go. It accidentally auto-added twice. Spell Swindle counters a spell and gives us that many treasures. So I like the idea of that. I like increasing Vengeance, especially if we're going to be caring about our graveyard at least a little bit. Hornswoggle, another one of those counter spells. I like the idea of trying something like Galvanic Iteration to copy a spell. We have Expansion Explosion, which is pretty good at doing the same thing. We have Reverberate, which is already in the deck. All right, let's go into Sorceries. We have Expressive Iteration, great way to get spells off the top of our library. We have See the Truth, which allows us to look at the top few cards. Rise and Shine is great in a treasure deck, and we'll get into that in a second. And we'll just kind of go through all these cards that I'm setting up. Expropriate, our big money. Turn ender, and I really like Mnemonic Deluge as well. Diabolic Intent is a tutor that we have to sacrifice a creature for. We should have plenty of ways to pay that off. Okay. Increasing Vengeance looks pretty good. You know, as a way to cast a spell, and if we cast one from our graveyard, we actually cast it twice, copy it twice. We'll try Galvanic. And then we'll put Expansion in here, although I think I like the other two a little bit better. Expressive Iteration lets us look at the top three. One goes to our hand, one gets played, one gets put back on the bottom. So that's a very good spell to start going through. Rise and Shine can definitely be a finisher. It says target non-artifact creature you control becomes a 0/0 artifact creature, and then you put 4+1/+1 counters on it. And if we overload it, it means all of our artifacts become that. So that can be really good. It can turn our treasure hoard, if we're using them to tap for mana, just basically into creatures, and we can attack with them. So what I'm doing here is just again, we're filling in some more of these spell slots that are going to end up being used probably over some of those creatures. Primal Amulet I really like. It costs a little bit to get down, but once we get it flipped, it allows us to copy spells. We have the Isochron Scepter Dramatic Reversal combo, if that's something we want to go towards. I think I'm going to avoid it for now, but it's something you can use. All right, here we'll go down to enchantments, and this is where I expect to get a few more added in. So we have Thousand Year Store, we have Rain of Riches, we have Double Vision, which is a card that I really enjoy. When you cast your first one each turn, you get to copy it, which I feel like could be really good. Storm the Vault. Whenever one of our creatures you control deals combat damage to a player, you get an artifact, and when you get 5 or more, it basically turns into a Tolarian Academy. Very good. Metallurgic Summonings will give us artifact tokens when we cast spells. Again, that fits into both our creature token game plan to get spells reduced by Magnus, and it allows us to get into our Galazeth game plan. Swarm Intelligence I can pass on. Mystic Study. Cryptic Pursuit seems interesting. When you cast a spell, manifest a card. Maestro's Academy lets us do another Kess ability, but you just have to sacrifice a creature, so that's kind of interesting. I like the idea of Shark Typhoon. It's a little expensive, but it allows us to get creature tokens whenever we cast any non-creature spell, instants including. Trail Evidence is probably a card that's more used in just a regular Galazeth list. I think we're going to pass on this one, but I kind of like the idea of Sorcerer class. Same thing, we got that. Might consider Teferi. It's going to allow us to do some drawing. All right, so let's add Shark Typhoon in. This is probably going to be a really tough. It's going to be a tough deck to cut down, and the main reason is I think we have a lot of. I think we'll cut the Sorcerer class. Teferi I think could be good because it can phase things out. This is going to be a tough deck to cut down. Almost only because there's going to be so many great cards and combinations of cards that we can play. And what we have to do is just try our best to take our pile of good stuff and push it down into specific things. So there goes that. Adding a couple more enchantments. I think, again, the number of enchantments will come down. We definitely won't be playing all 13 of those. Really like Treasure Vault. If we're going to be playing the treasure strategy, we can dump a bunch of extra mana into Treasure Vault and make a ton of treasures. So I really like that. Reliquary Tower seems like not a bad idea. I like Cabal Coffers and Innerborg. I just don't know how often we're going to be able to see both of them. Adventurous Sphere is something I had considered. We have, if you have artifacts 30 your turn, you get to gain life. We see the 3 artifact lands, which is something I had I had considered, because again, if we care about those artifact counts, they can be really good. We see Thought Vessel. Again, I'm looking for, I guess I didn't even think about the check lands, but the problem is, how many type lands do we have? We don't have a ton of type lands, which I worry that means they're going to come in untapped most of the time. But then again, more often than not, we're going to be getting those dual type lands right away. So I can see the benefit of them in there, because we're going to be trying to use those fetch lands right away. And again, we're just taking another look through just to see if there's anything I missed, anything I didn't think about. Spire of Industry is the one there where we can get a color of any color of mana as long as we control an artifact, which I feel like is going to be almost all the time. So I think Spire of Industry makes a ton of sense. Okay, I think that fills out our land base for now. What I think will end up happening is we'll end up going down a couple creatures, and probably down some instants and sorceries as well. But what I want to do here is just take a quick look and see if there's any other spells I didn't think of. Talrand would be another thing that can get us a token. Same thing with Jadar. Jadar can get us a token to sacrifice to Phyrexian Altar. Carmella seems pretty good. The reason I pulled up Angelo is it's probably going to have a lot of those things that are going to make tokens, and so I wanted to come in and see kind of what they had brewing over here. I don't really see much as far as new things I really care about. Let's see. Just taking a quick scan. I'm just moving left to right, trying to see if there's anything I didn't think about. Love the idea of Sublime Epiphany, but... All right, so I think Nexus of Fate as another extra turn spell seems like a really good idea. Brass's Bounty, I just worry that we're not going to have enough... Brass's Bounty, I just worry that we're not going to have enough lands to ever make it worth it. But I think if we're going to play Treasures, we got to play Brass's Bounty. I also really like Tasha's Hideous Laughter. It's just a good kind of semi-mill card. Just pushes our opponents off. And if we can set up a Tasha's Hideous Laughter with a Storm King's Thunder for a good amount of mana, we can mill all our opponents out. So I don't mind that as well. Let's toss in this Maestro's Ascendancy. I think eventually we're going to need to cast things from our graveyard, and having another way to do it seems like not a bad idea. We can't always, in my Kess list, I can always rely on Kess to be there, but in this deck, I don't think I can. But I can rely on us having creature tokens. Okay. Okay. So I think I'm going to change my mind here. I'm going to look up really quick. What happens? So, So it looks like the consensus is you can cast the card off of Cascade, you just can't suspend it. So I think that a lot of these cards become, well, A lot of these cards become a lot better than I thought they were going to be. I don't really think I want the Soul Talisman. We already have Soul Ring. But Max Tantalite for sure. Ancestral Vision. For sure. Profane Tutor for sure. The only other thing I'll have to take a look at as far as rulings go, and you guys can take a look at this as well, is how do they work when you, pardon me, how do they work when you, do like Mizzix Mastery? Can you still cast them off that way? That'll be the other thing I need to take a look at. So what I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna Google it. Because I'm kind of intrigued. So here we go. This is a little bit of a ancestral vision thing. So they found out not let you cast it from your graveyard, which makes sense. As foretold lets you pay 0 rather than it's casting us. You can cast it. Cascade lets you cast it. Flashback does not let you because it doesn't have an ability. And here it says anything that lets you play spells without paying their mana costs. So that means that Mizzix Mastery should work on those suspend cards as well. So I think I like those even more now, because then that means that Mizzix Mastery can go ahead and cast them as well. All right, we're at a whopping 139. So this is the problem. Now we got to go ahead and move this down, but that's okay. That's the fun of this, is trying to figure out. I actually don't really know how much we'll need Ashnod's Altar. I think Phyrexian Altar is a lot more important. Kind of thinking Chromatic Lantern might end up being too expensive. Is it really as good when we have all these other things we have access to? Maybe we cut it for now and see. We want a lot of these mana rocks because we're not going to have any ramp, so we really need them. I'm going to go to the creatures last. Let's come over here to sorceries and see if there's anything that we really want to cut. Let's cut the Deluge for now. As much as I really like it, I feel like it's just going to be really expensive. We don't really need Light Up the Stage. I think I'm going to cut Gamble for Imperial Seal. I'd rather put it on the top and cascade into it than run the risk of losing it to anything else. Seize the Spoils. It's 3 mana. I think I'm going to get rid of it because we have plenty of other ways to make treasures, and I'd rather game on these smaller spells that do good for me rather than have so many high expensive cards. I think Brass's Bounty is going to come back in. But again, I want to make sure that we're leaving open room for our instants and sorceries for other things. And I worry that if we game too hard into that, we won't. Big score, Blood for the Blood God just seems really good. Chaos Warp. I think I'm going to cut Chaos Warp. We have better removal. Deadly Dispute. I guess Deadly Dispute would be another reason there why we could cut that Seize the Spoils. Deadly Relic, Delayed Blast, Fireball. Expansion Explosion. I've kind of sold myself off of Delayed Blast Fireball. As much as I like it, I don't know if it's actually truly going to be better than holding a couple spots for these copy spells that I can use from my hand. Prismark Command, Reality Shift, Reverberate. I think we might actually cut Reverberate because we have a couple other ones that end up doing just as good. Okay, let's get into, down to 128. Let's get into our enchantments. I think 1 or 2 of these need to be cut. We'll cut the Double Vision for now because I think a lot of the rest of them provide better value. Maestros Academy lets us get things out of our graveyard. Metallurgic Summoning is going to get us tokens. Passion Archaeologist is going to get us stuff off the Cascade. Rain of Riches, Revel in Riches. Ristic Study, we probably cut Shark Typhoon. It seems a little expensive. Storm the Vault we really want for the backside. Lost in a Dam seems to look good because it gets us that token. Ruinous Power seems really cool, and I think Warstorm Surge could probably get cut because I don't think we're going to end up being able to really do much with it. 125. All right, well, I think it's going to come down to our creatures. So let's see what we really need. We really need stuff that create tokens, but we really also need stuff that deals damage. So we kind of have to ride this line. So let's go re-go through these. Tanzgore Shaman I like. I just feel like now maybe it gets outclassed. Twilight Prophet I still really like. Torwaki, Stormguard, Spark Double. Maybe we cut the Spark Double. Smoldering Egg is only one player when it flips, so maybe we cut it. Swintor Whips gives me the tokens, which again I can use. Sakushima Fireweaver is going to give me damage when stuff comes in. Facebreaker, remember we can sack that treasure to exile cards from the top of our library, like Poppet Stitcher. So Pink Horror only deals damage to one target, not everyone. Maybe that's a reason why we kind of take it out. Like Marinaster, love Magnus, love that. Keeper of Secrets kind of seems like it got priced out. It seems very expensive for the ability. Jimmy G, Jinkataxis, love it. Gutter Snipe, Goldspan, Galazeth, Firebrand Archer. Maybe comes out. We've got plenty of those abilities. I still like this because at the start of turn it gives us stuff back. Maybe the Field comes out because we've got so many other abilities. We need to cut 19 cards. Wow. I think we cut Teferi Master of Time. We're still at 118. Okay, this is gonna get really tough, and I don't know that I want to let the video like keep going for like 10 minutes while I try to figure out min-maxing this, what the heck I want to do. So I think what I'm gonna do at this point is just like we did for the Tyranid video. I'm gonna cut the 18 or so cards I think become less worth it. Then what I'm going to do is I'm gonna leave the deck exactly how it is. You guys can come in and edit it however you'd like to for your own benefits. And then I'm going to take this deck and copy it and do what I want to do with it. So I think we'll go ahead, for the purpose of getting rid of the 18 cards, we're going to cut the Lotus Bloom. It's not as good as the other cards that we get. Coming over to Sorceries. We cut Mind's Desire. Where it might be a little too expensive. I think we can cut. I'm not a giant fan of Wheel of Fate, so I think I'm going to cut that one. I just don't like wheels very much. Especially if we have a full hand, it always feels kind of awkward. I think we can cut Diabolic Intent. I think we cut Imperial Seal for Diabolic Intent. I like that going to the hand better. Inevitable Betrayal just seems weird, but I guess it works. Let's go to the instance. The Vamp Tutor I like. Unexpected Windfall, Stormy Thunder. I almost want to cut Blood for the Blood God. It's going to be so hard to get to go off, but if it goes off, it's going to be so good. Maybe we go down one of the big draw spells, like we go down Unexpected Windfall or Big Score, just because we have so many other things that are going to make us treasures. I feel like one more thing needs to get cut here, and I kind of want it to be Storm the Vault. Maybe the Ruinous Powers. Again, what I want to do here is get it down to 100 and let you guys edit it however you'd like. You know, you guys are probably going to have different preferences than I do as far as cards here. But what I think we need to do is get it down to 100, have somewhere to start, and then, you know, make those one-to-one card swaps however you see fit. Got to remember that Sahelia acts as a creature producer, so maybe it goes in over something like Young Pyromancer. creatures in this deck are just so good. I don't really know what to pick because Academy Factor works so well with Galazeth. So does everything else. Oh, man. I'm not entirely sure here, guys. And I think this is probably one of the only times I'm ever going to do this. But I'm going to call it here at 110 because I have no idea what to pick. This is going to take me probably another 20 minutes to look through this deck list and make some cuts. So what I'm going to do is down in the description, you're going to see the final list of 100 after I go through and kind of pull some things out. I'm going to leave the sideboard to about 15 cards or so, just so that way you guys can, again, like I do with all my decks, leave you a sideboard to have some cards that you consider putting back in or bringing out for other things during your playtesting. That way you guys have stuff you consider. But man, that was Abaddon. I really enjoyed this deck. In fact, I think I might end up liking it better than Kess. I'm not entirely sure. I think I'm going to test them against each other and see which I like more as the commander, and then probably try to marry the two lists together in a kind of way that I like. But otherwise, guys, I hope you enjoyed Abaddon. I hope you enjoyed my take on Abaddon, at least. I'm sure there's going to be lots of people's takes on Abaddon out there, so go look. I apologize to anyone who was looking for more of a pre-con upgrade here, because, again, I didn't really like the pre-con, and so I wanted to kind of make this deck my own. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said, deck list down in the description, and I will catch you next time.